The old janitor's hands shook as he packed his thermos into the box. 31 years. Gone in 30 seconds. Get out of my building, the CEO shouted, jabbing his finger toward the door, his voice echoing off the glass walls of the corner office. It was December 24th. Snow was falling outside. Somewhere down on the street, carolers were singing about peace on earth. Up here, on the 40th floor, there was no peace at all. His name was Walter Briggs. 68 years old. Beard the color of ash. Hands cracked from decades of mop buckets and floor wax. He'd cleaned this building since it was 4 stories shorter, since the man yelling at him now was a boy in a stroller his own father used to wheel through the lobby. Walter didn't argue. He didn't beg. He just nodded, the way a man nods when the wind is too strong to fight. He picked up his box. A small plant. A photo of his daughter and grandson. A cracked picture frame nobody else would ever notice was cracked. A young woman near the door covered her mouth. She'd seen Walter every morning for 6 years. He always knew her name. He always asked about her son's asthma. She'd never once heard him raise his voice. The CEO's name was Richard Hale. 44 years old. 2 private jets. A name in business magazines. A man who had inherited a company and was terrified, somewhere deep down, that he hadn't earned a single floor of it. That morning, Richard had found a 40 watch missing from a drawer in the executive lounge. He didn't ask questions. He didn't check cameras. He just looked at the old man who cleaned that lounge every night and decided he already knew the answer. Walter walked past the Christmas tree in the lobby, the one he'd decorated himself every year since 1994. He walked past the security desk, where a guard named Marcus stood frozen, not knowing what to say. He walked out into the snow with a cardboard box and 31 years folded inside it. Nobody clapped. Nobody apologized. But somewhere, in a small steel locker in the basement break room, Walter had left something behind. Something he never got the chance to take. A letter. He'd written it 11 years ago and never had the courage to send it. He kept meaning to. Then one Christmas became another, and the letter just stayed there, tucked behind his spare uniform, waiting. If you believe small acts of kindness can still change a life, even now, even in a world that feels colder every year, hit that subscribe button before we go any further. Because what happens next is going to test exactly that belief. 3 days later, a new cleaning crew was clearing out old lockers. A young man named Tarek found an envelope with one word written on the front. Richard. He almost threw it away. Almost. Instead, he carried it up 40 floors and left it on the CEO's desk, because something about it felt important, even if he couldn't say why. Richard almost ignored it too. He had a watch thief to forget about and a holiday party to attend. But he opened it, and what he read made him sit down slowly in his leather chair, the city lights blinking far below him. The letter wasn't an apology. It wasn't an excuse. It was a memory. 11 years ago, Richard's father, the man who built this company, had collapsed in the lobby late one night. Heart attack. No one else was in the building. No one except an old janitor named Walter, who found him on the cold marble floor, called the ambulance, and stayed kneeling beside him, holding his hand and talking to him so he wouldn't feel alone, until the paramedics arrived. Richard's father survived that night. He lived 4 more years because of those 11 extra minutes. He'd asked Walter never to mention it. He didn't want pity, and he didn't want his son to think he was weak. Walter had kept that promise for over a decade. The letter was the one place he'd ever written the truth down, not to be praised, just so somebody, someday, would know. Richard read it twice. Then a third time. He remembered his father's last years. The version of him that played catch in the park. Drove Richard to college. Walked him down the aisle at his wedding. For years he never should have had. Because of a janitor he'd just screamed at and thrown out into the snow. Here's something worth remembering before we go further. The biggest moment in this story hasn't happened yet, and it's about to break your heart in the best way. Richard didn't sleep that night. By morning, he was standing outside a small apartment building on the edge of town, the same address from an old employee file, holding a different kind of box than the one Walter had carried out 3 days before. When Walter opened the door, he looked tired, older than Richard remembered. Richard didn't say sorry first. He couldn't get the words out. He just held up the letter. Walter's eyes filled instantly. 11 years of silence, finally seen. You kept your promise, Richard whispered. Now let me keep mine. The watch, it turned out, had been Richard's nephew's prank, found 2 days later in a coat pocket. Richard didn't lead with that. He led with the truth that mattered more. That Walter had given his family 4 extra years and asked for nothing in return. Walter got his job back that week. Not as a janitor, as director of building operations, with an office, though everyone knew he'd still rather be the one decorating the lobby tree every December. And every Christmas Eve after that, Richard made sure of one thing himself, that no one in that building ever walked out into the snow alone, misjudged, forgotten, or unseen. Not on his watch, not ever again. Some debts can't be repaid in money, only in the way we choose to see each other. If this story moved you, subscribe for more real, heartfelt human stories, because kindness like Walter's is still out there, quietly changing lives, one unnoticed moment at a time.